if good players in this game are going to have any responsibility, besides outside of making guides for anything, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be your responsibility to not play like an absolute shitbag. And I think those people that play in those situations are the lowest of the low, because you have the ability to go make a difference at a fight that needs you, that's lower population, that you are underpopped in, but you are choosing instead to go sit and vulture someone and play in this manner. And that's one of my biggest problems with the player base in the game nowadays.
I especially really enjoyed watching a back and forth between you and Commander Cyrious from some years ago. All started with his. He was doing like a advanced heavy assault guide, and he wanted to take pains to make a value statement to say not how to play heavy assault well, but how to play it morally, I think.
Yeah.
And he wanted to
Gotta
say,
be a good person and play the class. Yeah.
right, like it's almost like teaching manners before you teach karate, which it makes sense. I think that the intention is interesting and valuable. And what he did is at the time Sirius's take, and I'll let you jump in and give me your kind of narration of what happened. My takeaway was that he was trying to speak to the player with the ambition of being good and give them the right direction they needed to play the game well without taking it out on people who weren't playing to be good. Something like that. And he specifically called you out in that. So yeah.
Regrettably.
Well, it made content. You gotta admit that. Now, I think from watching that video, my take on it was, he might have. I think Cyrious had a good point to make, and this is back in 2018. Opinions change. I'm not actually calling out Cyrious. Even your response video, I know that you've said that you've changed the way you think about some of the things that have been said since then. We all change. No worries.
Yeah, I'll just say that, like, that video, I hate that video, that I even did that video. I think it's a poor quality video. There's no script. I even have that in the description of it.
The reaction.
This is unscripted. This is not the intent that I want to take the channel in. Just making assassination videos on popular Planetside creators. It's not necessarily what I wanted to do, but since I was personally called out in that video, I felt like it was. I'm not just going to sit here and let you do that, especially when you're dead wrong. So,
right. So I have some notes from the video. Like here's some takeaways I have from the Cyrious video. He's wanted to distinguish between farming and skilled play. He says skilled play is when two players of roughly equal skill 1v1, which you pointed out in your retort. You can't guarantee that in Planetside.
It's fake.
He put a lot of emphasis on the ADR stat, which is the ratio of attacks to defenses on bases, which is
another fake stat.
Troublesome. He suggested that players who play in a way that are farming centric are actually not useful outside of those farms. And I think that maybe there's a discussion to be had there about that way of playing the game. But again, he pointed his finger at you, which I think is just probably the wrong target. Like Lex, I've seen you play, and we've talked about this in the past too, like offline. You don't take fights for stats, from what I've seen, and I know one of the things.
I can't even. I have so many numbers in my stats now. Like moving a stat, I can't do it. I can't move my stats anymore. Like the amount that I can move stats with play. Like I have, like, almost 500,000 people killed. Right. So being able to move stats is almost impossible. So when I play now, which I'm rarely doing anymore, I look at my, KPM, what I'm shooting, like if I'm being able to shoot 40-40 and what my KPM is. Other than that, I don't care, because that's it.
Yeah. So 40-40 being 40% accuracy, 40% headshot ratio, which creates a 1600 IVI, which most people would consider to be very good. I'm like a 800 IVI player on a good day by comparison. So yeah, very different levels of ability there. But even so, like even at my level, but 800 IVI, I still beat most people.
Will, and even at my level, I still die to the lowest of the low. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a good. Like, I think I mentioned this in some of my videos. At the end of the day, it's a useful ballpark metric to see, like, what is this player's power versus another player. But
Mhm.
also, it's skewed. But I think I mentioned that too. It could be some awful, terrible sniper that has 2,500 IVI. Like,
Yeah.
it's all on how you use it. You have to get the context for everything.
Yeah. Yeah, the context is critical. And I think the way Cyrious wrapped up that video that you then responded to, here, last couple notes I have on it are, he said something very poetic, which is it's seal clubbing, which is, beating up on new players intentionally to inflate your how good you feel. Should be done silently and shamefully.
Still waiting to find out what filter on the map it is that shows me, what battle rank people are at a
Right,
given fight.
right.
Still waiting.
And he said that if you do stumble into a group of new players who you trip over and kill 15 times, that you should message them and proactively suggest resources so they can get better. I don't know a lot of people in PvP games who necessarily respond very well to getting dominated and then told to here's a tool to get better, scrub.
They tell you to shove it up your ass, man. Like, that's how
Yeah,
the most. Like, if I've ever tried to help anyone, and ask them a question, like, they're pretty mad. They don't want to
yeah.
hear it.
Um, and then now, actually going through, and I actually rewatched his video and your response to it before we sat down today, and I think like maybe this is wrong. Tell me what you think. But you defended yourself as you should have. You pointed out how a lot of these arguments didn't really apply either in general or to you specifically. Um, I think you made some good points. Um, but here's a hypothesis I kind of generated while watching, and I wonder if it lands at all. Which is that, and I have to add a little more context, I guess, to float this out there. Because you and I have talked while I'm just streaming or whatever, and complained about it's about. Let me try to find a way to put this respectfully to everyone. There are some players who, with some level of skill, who don't play with a lot of risk. And they seem to uh, do things like surfing over pop, which
Yeah,
is
that's
based.
most of the players that are considered good players nowadays. They have no population ethics whatsoever.
Mhm.
They don't care. And then if you call them out for it, it destroys their worldview, and they get out their why I'm in this pop.txt, and they just run down the list. Well, it was an even fight when I got here, and well, I don't have the map open, and well, I was only here for a second, and it's the only fight, bro. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, I'm not playing that.
Actually, I think if after I rewatched both your video and Sirius' video, the sense I have is that actually you both of you guys have the same attitude towards that player, and he just thought you were
Yeah,
one, and it was
for
incorrect.
me, that comes from if good players in this game are going to have any responsibility, besides outside of making guides for anything, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be your responsibility to not play like an absolute shitbag. And I think those people that play in those situations are the lowest of the low, because you have the ability to go make a difference at a fight that needs you, that's lower population, that you are underpopped in, but
Mhm.
you are choosing instead to go sit and vulture someone and play in this manner. And that's one of my biggest problems with the player base in the game nowadays. It's happened historically, but it's like, when I talk to Vert, when Vert comes back and plays the game from time to
Mm.
time, he'll do his 2, 3, 4 hour session, and then all the time, he'll send me a Discord message after. He's like, two things that never changed in Planetside is degraded performance and the same losers in Overpop, and that's just totally true.
And why do you think people are attracted to playing that way? What's your perception of it?
My perception of it is that it's super low risk. They have bodies to bait behind. I don't know. I think they're just lazy. I think at some point I can understand. I can level with them, because going to those fights, those 30%, 40% fights,
Mhm.
that are horrible. They're very frustrating to fight at, and it's not fun. So, in a sense, I kind of get why they don't do it, but I feel like for me, like I force myself to go to that stuff, and probably, it's probably not helped my view on the game because, that's a whole nother thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it would be really easy to just surf pop all day. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, sure, I could do it, but I feel like it's just scummy. It's just scummy, and you have a greater responsibility than to just sit. The game is already unfun enough for most people, so why are you going to be that guy? Don't be
Right.
that guy. Just
Right.
stop.
Yeah, and here's where I think you and Cyrious actually have the same message to preach, which is at least from that video, which is if you're going to take the time to be good, if you're going to get good, to become powerful in true, like, let's quote Spider-Man, you have an obligation to wield it well and wield it morally.
Yeah, and I think we differ on what morally means, but
You can split
in
those hairs.
terms of
Everyone does it differently, I'm sure.
sure, but yeah, we're in agreement for sure. Yeah, you have a responsibility to not be a loser, and I think that gets lost on a lot of Planetside players.
Sure. One of the things that you mentioned that I have to admit to is like, for me, sometimes the pop is only something I pay attention to, and most people will know this. Most people know Planetside really well, but for those who don't, pop is population. The thing that people usually care about the most when they're deploying into a fight and they're selecting a base to fight at to take it to the enemy is how big is the fight? Is there a platoon on each side? Is there half a platoon on each side? Is it 2 platoons on each side? And what's the relative population balance? Is it 50-50? Is it a completely fair fight? Is it 60-40? Is it one way? Is it 70-30? Is it really ridiculous? And so surfing over pop is when you deliberately make things easy on yourself by going to places where your faction already has a numerical advantage and where you can soak up the benefit of having lots of bodies around you to attract enemy crosshairs. Which is one thing I've complained about as someone who likes playing light assault, the jetpack class. And I'm like, you can get good angles all day, but a good angle ain't got shit on having 3 or 4 guys next to you wearing the same colors you wear. Like, just the way it works in a completely open game like Planetside. I was starting to say that I tend to check the population only usually when I'm deploying in. And once I get to a fight, I get kind of lazy. And if it tips in my direction, I just kind of ride it. And I think part of the reason I do that is because unless you have to be at a certain skill level to make playing solo infantry fun in a game like Planetside.
Yeah, it requires a lot of overhead. You need to know a lot about the game. Like, you need to know. Really, a lot of it for people is just a feel thing. Like, you talk about, okay, I may get to a fight and it's a certain pop, but then throughout the course of the fight, moving through the base, you're like, okay, this is kind of a fight that I want to be at, but there's also like they're not really getting inside and doing anything. So there's nobody for me to kill, so I might leave and go to something else. Like, it's a total feel type thing. Whereas a fight numerically might need you there, might be nothing for you to do.
Right,
you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I read somewhere, actually, no, I know exactly where I heard this. Alex Jaffe, a guy who works in research at Riot Games, did a talk on cursed problems in game design. And he mentioned this really interesting data point that I haven't tracked down, so I'm just going to assume he's right, which is that on average, people feel games are fair when they win 2 times out of 3. And if they win fewer than 2 times out of 3, then they feel the game is unfair. And that 2 times out of 3, if you put that in kill to death terms, is a 2 KD heavy.
Yeah.
It points right to the meme. And
strange, isn't it?
I think it's perfectly logical, and I love that it's logical. And maybe the reason, if there is like let's call them a farmer's class, right? A people who play the game to seek, who do things like engage with overpop, who do things like don't challenge themselves the way they could, who go around Steel Club when they get a chance. Maybe all they're trying to do is chase that feeling of fairness, which comes from winning 2 out of 3. And like for me, like I'm like a lifetime. I push my by working hard. I pushed myself up from like a 1.5 to a 2 KD on my Emerald character last year, and then now that I've been streaming, it's just all fallen to shit. I'm like down to 1.6 or something.
That's excuses, man. I see how you play. You just are suicidal.
Yes, this is true.
You
This
play
is
a
true.
little bit more carefully.